3 sponsors. That's the number quietly circulating through golf media right now, and if even part of it turns out true, the tour has a much bigger problem than a few annoyed players. You already know the 2-track system got approved. You already know Rory called the lower tier a glorified Corn Ferry Tour. But here's what almost nobody's talking about yet. The part of this deal that could actually drain money out of the tour before a single ball gets hit in 2028. One sponsor has already walked, and this one has a name. Farmers Insurance, title sponsor for 17 years. Gone, right before this whole structure got finalized. The tour thanked them politely on the way out. But was that really unrelated timing, or the first confirmed name on a list that's about to get longer? That exit was the warning shot. What happens next decides if it was a coincidence or the start of something bigger, because here's the thing about sponsors. They don't usually announce why they're really leaving. They just leave and let everyone guess, and the guessing has already started. Inside golf media, more than one sponsor is being floated as a name watching this new system with serious hesitation. The kind of hesitation that tends to show up publicly about a year later as a quiet non-renewal. Those other names aren't confirmed yet, and I won't pretend they are. But the pattern behind them is real, and it's the same pattern that just cost the tour Farmers Insurance after 17 years. So which sponsors could become names 2 and 3? Why does removing one small rule about sponsor exemptions threaten millions in tournament funding? And why are some players watching this unfold a lot more nervously than they're letting on? Here's my take. I think this 2-track system fixes one problem and creates 3 new ones nobody on the policy board wanted to talk about out loud. Do you think the tour saw this coming, or are they about to learn the hard way? Drop your take below, and stick around, because the part about the players is the part nobody saw coming. If you're into real PGA Tour breakdowns like this, hit subscribe. More of this is coming. That guessing game starts with one simple fact. The rules just changed for everyone who used to get a free pass into a tournament field. Sponsor exemptions are gone. No more inviting a struggling former star to boost ticket sales. No more slipping a hometown favorite into the lineup to keep local fans interested. That tool, the one sponsors actually paid for, disappeared the moment the policy board signed off on this restructuring. Think about what that actually means for a regional title sponsor. They're not just buying a logo on a leaderboard. They're buying access, the ability to shape who shows up and put a recognizable face in front of their cameras and their clients. A sponsor in a smaller market could pay for one exemption spot and suddenly have a former major champion in their field, drawing a bigger crowd, bigger ratings, bigger return on a sponsorship check that otherwise might not justify itself. That single spot could be the difference between a sold-out grandstand and a half-empty one, between a strong local broadcast number and a forgettable one. Take that lever away entirely, and you have to ask what exactly they're still paying for, and the tour's own people don't have an answer yet. That uncertainty isn't coming from outside the sport, it's coming from inside the golf media covering this story in real time. One of the tour's own beat reporters admitted, flat out, that nobody actually knows how sponsors will respond. Whether they'll keep funding events the same way, whether they'll renegotiate for something new in return, or whether some will quietly start asking for a different deal entirely once their current contract runs out. And that uncertainty already has a face attached to it. 17 years as a title sponsor, 17 years of Farmers Insurance's name on a tournament, on broadcasts, on history, on a golf course that fans associate with that brand as much as with the event itself. Then, right as this new system locks into place, they're out. The tour issued the usual thank you statement, the kind that gets sent every time a long relationship ends. Gracious, brief, and carefully worded to avoid saying anything specific. No drama, no public fallout, no replacement sponsor named yet either. Just an exit, timed in a way that makes you wonder. Was it a coincidence? Maybe. But it's exactly the kind of moment that makes other sponsors start running their own numbers behind closed doors. One veteran already crunched those numbers out loud, and his math should worry everyone at headquarters. He questioned whether the top tier's price tag even makes financial sense for the companies being asked to fund it. $30 million, he argued, for 1 week of golf, from one sponsor, isn't something most companies can keep justifying year after year, especially when the return on that spend depends entirely on which players actually show up. And under the new rules, sponsors have far less control over that than they used to. He didn't stop at the top tier either. He raised the same doubt about the lower tier's economics, questioning whether a series built around developing players and smaller purses can realistically attract the sponsorship dollars it needs to survive long-term. That's two tiers, two separate funding models, and one respected voice from inside the sport publicly doubting both at once. If a voice like that is raising both of those doubts on record, you can be sure boardrooms are raising the same questions privately right now, in meetings nobody outside the company will ever hear about. And it's worth being honest about the other side of this too, because the tour isn't losing every sponsor fight. A new title sponsor just signed a multi-year deal worth a $20 million purse for one of the upcoming events, proof that some companies still see real value in being attached to this sport, even under the new structure. Tour officials have pointed to that deal directly as evidence that golf is still a brand sponsors want to be near, regardless of what's happening with exemptions. So this isn't a one-way collapse. It's a tug-of-war, with some sponsors leaning in while Farmers Insurance quietly leans out, and right now nobody can say for certain which side wins by the time 2028 actually arrives. But sponsors pulling back money is only half of this story. The other half is happening in the locker room, and it's far more personal. Because while companies are quietly running spreadsheets, players are quietly running the numbers on their own careers. The new system doesn't just remove a sponsor's tool, it draws a hard line through the entire player pool. Stay in the top tier, and you keep your spot, your purse size, your exposure, your career trajectory intact. Slide into the lower tier, and you're fighting your way back up through what Rory himself already mocked in public as barely more than a glorified version of the developmental tour that used to be a stepping stone, not a demotion. Right now, under the new cutoff rules, several recognizable names on tour would already be sitting on the wrong side of that line if the season ended today. These aren't unknown players. They're guys fans recognize from leaderboards, guys who've made cuts, made checks, built solid mid-tier careers over years of grinding through the schedule. And under this new structure, some of them would be staring at relegation instead of a tee time in the top events they've earned a place in before. Picture grinding for a decade to build a career inside the top tier of professional golf, only to watch a rule change move the finish line on you overnight, with no transition period and no say in how it happened. For a player in that position, every event between now and 2028 stops being just another tournament. It becomes a referendum on whether their career survives the new system intact. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. These are exactly the type of players who used to get rescued by a sponsor exemption when a bad stretch hit, the kind of safety net that let a recognizable name claw back into form without losing everything over one rough season. That safety net is gone too. So now ask yourself, what happens when the players losing status are the same ones losing their last lifeline at the same time? That's not a small problem. That's two pressure points hitting the same group of players at once, and neither the tour nor the players have a clean answer for it yet. No transition plan has been announced for players caught in that exact squeeze, and with 2 years still on the clock before this fully kicks in, that's a long time for resentment to build quietly without resolution. Rory's already said what he thinks. Calling the lower tier a glorified Corn Ferry Tour wasn't a slip of the tongue in a casual interview. That was a top player, in front of cameras, at one of the sport's biggest events, telling the tour exactly how he sees the system they just approved. Justin Thomas wasn't much warmer, saying publicly this isn't how he would have drawn it up if it were his call to make. When two of the biggest names in the sport are publicly lukewarm about a plan that hasn't even started yet, that's not noise you can write off. That's a signal. And signals like that have a way of spreading quietly through a locker room before they ever show up in a headline. Nobody's talking about boycotts. Nobody's skipping events over this. Not now. Not with 2 years still to go before the system even exists. But disengagement doesn't always look like a dramatic exit. Sometimes it looks like top players quietly adjusting their schedules around events tied to the new system, quietly distancing themselves in subtle ways, quietly deciding where their loyalty actually sits while the cameras are pointed somewhere else, and nobody's asking them directly yet. So picture this, a sponsor that already has doubts about the money, a mid-tier player who already lost his safety net, a top player who already said this isn't how he'd build it if he were in charge. Now put all three of those people in the same room, at the same tournament, under the same new rules, and ask yourself honestly how long that arrangement holds together without something breaking first. That's the real risk here. Not one sponsor walking, not one player complaining. It's all three pressure points hitting at once, feeding off each other, while the tour tries to hold a brand new structure together with 2 years still left before it even officially begins. and very little public reassurance offered to either side in the meantime. Because here's the chain reaction nobody at headquarters wants to say out loud. Fewer recognizable names in a field makes sponsors nervous about their return on investment. Nervous sponsors pull back money or walk entirely once their contracts come up. Less money pushes the tour to lean harder on its biggest markets and biggest names to keep overall revenue from dropping. And leaning harder on the big names squeezes the mid-tier players and the regional sponsors even more than before, pushing exactly the group already struggling further toward the edge. That's not a one-time problem. That's a loop. And loops like that don't fix themselves. They just get louder and more expensive with every event that passes without a fix. History inside this sport already shows what happens when a tour ignores a growing sponsor or player complaint for too long, instead of addressing it early. Small cracks tend to widen quietly for years before they become a headline nobody can ignore, and by the time that headline hits, the easy fixes are usually gone. The tour has roughly 2 full seasons left to get ahead of this loop before the 2028 rollout makes every one of these questions permanent and unavoidable. So let's go back to where we started, because you came here for one specific thing: which sponsors are actually walking out and why. Here's where that stands right now, with everything we actually know. Confirmed. Farmers Insurance is gone after 17 years, with no replacement sponsor announced as of today. Strongly signaled but not yet confirmed, at least 2 more sponsors are being discussed inside golf media as names to watch, tied directly to doubts about lost exemption access and uncertain Challenger Series funding. That's not me dodging the question. That's the honest, current shape of the story. One confirmed exit with a name attached, a credible financial case for why others could follow, and a tour that hasn't publicly answered the sustainability question a respected veteran already raised out loud. And the causal chain matters just as much as the names themselves. This isn't simply sponsors getting cold feet for no clear reason. It's a direct response to 2 specific changes the tour just made: killing sponsor exemptions outright and locking in a financial structure that even tour veterans are calling unsustainable in public. That's the real mechanism connecting the 2-track system to sponsor risk, not vague unhappiness floating around, but a removed tool and an unsolved math problem sitting in plain sight, with 2 years left on the clock for the tour to either fix it or watch it play out in public. So here's my honest take, after laying all of that out for you. I think this 2-track system was built to fix one real problem, and in doing that, it opened up 3 new ones that nobody on the policy board wanted to say out loud in that announcement. Farmers Insurance already proved it by leaving. 2 more sponsors are circling, according to the people who cover this sport closest. And a locker room full of players is watching every bit of it unfold, quietly deciding where their loyalty actually sits before any of us find out the hard way. Do you think the tour saw this coming, or are they about to learn it the hard way once 2028 actually arrives? Drop your take in the comments. I want to know if you think this saves the tour or quietly breaks the players and sponsors who built it. If you want more breakdowns like this before the rest of the golf world catches up, hit subscribe now, because this story is far from over.